So welcome to today's Accessibility Tech Hour, and it's rather special, first of all, because we've got Steve Jacobs as a special guest, and secondly, because we're discussing opportunities provided by the US government, who are funding to the tune of 4 or 5 million over 3 years, that's dollars, projects related to accessibility in a fairly focused and particular way. So if each of you could briefly tell us how you learned about this, what your special skills and interests are you interested in coder or math accessibility or both, or anything else that's interesting to you? So I'll start. I learned about this. My name's Jonathan Fine. I learned about this because Steve Jacobs contacted me and said, are you interested in this funding opportunity? And I said, yes, I am. Let's do a tech hour about it. So that's how I learned about it. My special skills are tech and mathematics, and to a certain extent working in a university environment, because I used to work in the Open University. My interests are more in math accessibility than coding accessibility, but I am interested in both. Who'd like to go next?
I guess I'm next up on the screen here. I'm Nelson Beebe at the University of Utah Mathematics Department. I'm not by any means an expert in accessibility issues, but I'm interested because I have to deal with a lot of students on our campus that are writing papers and theses and dissertations. And so I'm mostly going to be sitting here in the background and listening carefully and making notes.
I guess I can jump in. I'm Patrick Smyth. I kind of getting increasingly hard to describe my background, but I come from the humanities, and so I've done a lot of grant writing, but I'm also a coder, mainly Python, Bash, and a few other languages. And for the last few years, I've kind of gotten into this area of technical training, which is, so last few years I ran a program at Columbia University, teaching people coding, and before that we wrote a big grant, a National Endowment for the Humanities grant for Digital Humanities Research Institute. So that was basically a bunch of coding tutorials for humanists and other people in the academy, and we did a boot camp and stuff around that. And then I'm also visually impaired, so that's where I come from, like in the accessibility, like my interest in the accessibility space. So very interested in this grant. I'm also started my own, it just a few months ago, started my own business, IOTA, around technical training. So.
Okay, maybe I can call on Volker to come on next.
All right, thank you. So my name is Volker Sorge. I am interested primarily in STEM accessibility in general, not just math. I hold a chair or professorship in document analysis and accessibility at the University of Birmingham in the UK. I primarily do a lot of logic, computer algebra, and document analysis. I got sidetracked into the accessibility when Google invited me for a year to do some of my ideas in their screen reader, which kind of got me into the math accessibility side of things. First time I met Steve there as well. I think it was for Google I/O when we presented our first math steps in Chromevox at the time, and you were there for Ideal Group. Yeah, and primarily nowadays I'm really keen on diagrams, and I'll still do the formula accessibility within the math tracks context, and I'll also do it within a context of a project, which I think Rob is going to explain next. Rob, it's you.
Rob says he can only lurk because he's got an office hour with a student and giving an exam.
Then I'll pass the buck to Alexei, because he knows all about it as well.
All right. Thank you, Walker. Yeah, so I'm kind of in a similar situation because it's office hours right now, so hence the mask and so forth. So if somebody walks in, I will have to put this on as per university regulations. I'm a mathematics professor at Towson University. My interest in this was sparked when a colleague asked me whether or not there is a text to Braille button or command. I surely thought that there was, and it turns out that this is an unsolved problem with a lot of partial solutions. I was fortunate to team up with Rob Beezer and Volker. So Rob is leading an important project on pretext, which is a combination of markup language that combines, that uses text for mathematics. And it turns out that that format is much easier to translate into Braille than just the usual text file. And I heard about this meeting because Volker sent me an email about it.
Oh, sorry, perhaps David Farmer next.
David Farmer, I'm at the American Institute of Mathematics. I'm on some news group that posted about this thing. Normally, I would go to this tech hour all the time, but I have back-to-back meetings that overlap this. Just one of them finished, so I happen to be able to pop in for a few minutes. I'm really interested in the pipeline from what people, mathematics accessibility, and the pipeline from what people write to what the reader sees or hears or absorbs. When I write vertical line X vertical line, I know if I mean absolute value or determinant or cardinality. I believe it's possible to easily capture that at the point it's authored. And then there's an issue of not losing that information throughout the pipeline. Thanks.
Okay, and William, if you'd like to.
Okay, my interest has been in learning LaTeX tech. At my age, I probably should be more concerned about accessibility. And I heard about this meeting from the last meeting.
Okay, so I'm going to go on now and give my take of the formal statement, which, a bit like mathematics, it takes you a while to understand all the parts and see how they fit together. And then when you begin to understand it, it all makes a lot of sense and is a lot easier to remember. So I've highlighted from the key passage from the call for funding, or the draft call, the opportunity. Let me just clarify, it's not yet a call for funding. I guess certain budget things have to happen first before it can actually be publicized, not publicized, become official. So I've highlighted half a dozen phrases from the grant opportunity forecast. Number one is beneficial to the target population. They say that when you write, the first words in the paragraph and the last words in the paragraph are the most important. This is the last words, beneficial to the target population. So it's not research for the sake of research, beneficial for the target population. Now, the purpose of the program is to either generate new knowledge through research and/or develop methods, procedures, and so forth. In carrying out the project, use knowledge and understanding gained from research, there we go again, to create materials, etc., that are beneficial to the target population. And the fifth thing is the general goals and the target population, maximize the full inclusion and integration into society, and that includes employment, family, and economic self-sufficiency of persons with disabilities. That's the only point at which disability is mentioned, but it's really important, especially people with the highest support needs. So if I can paraphrase all of that, beneficial to the target population, research-based, and if you need to do research, you should do research, and the outcome should be either further knowledge and methods, procedures, and so forth that will help these people. So you're not out to actually go out and help people, but you're to provide resources that can be used in the field to help people. So there presumably has to be trial runs, interventions, and the usual panoply of statistical devices, perhaps, as used in social sciences. I think Alexei may have had a student come in because he's suddenly been replaced by his screensaver. So I'll pause for a moment on that. And if there are no questions, I'll ask Steve Jacobs, who I think is going to give a bit more of an introduction, US-based, about the project, and then tell us something about what the idea group, which he heads up, does. So if you're ready for that, over to Steve Jacobs.
Thank you, Jonathan. By the way, hi, Volker. It's been a long time since I've seen you in Kentucky and on the West Coast at Google. The reason I reached out to Jonathan is that I was given information that within the next few days, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Community Living is going to be issuing a solicitation for proposals. And math accessibility, which is something of great interest to us at our company, fits right in there. The Department of Health and Human Services, the head of that department, reports directly to President Biden, and he is on his cabinet. We have a good relationship with the current administration and have benefited from quite a few grants in the past having to do with mathematics. And I'll give you a brief background on my company, Ideal Group. It is a 2002 spinoff from Ideal at NCR Corporation, which I'm sure you've all heard of NCR Corporation. And our focus is on developing technologies, processes, and so on in support of individuals with disabilities. This particular solicitation, when it hits the ground, will describe a 3-year grant at $200,000 US per year. The second and third year are contingent upon success in the previous years. And I thought it might be a good idea to brainstorm whether or not experts, and I don't necessarily consider myself a technical expert. I know a little bit about a lot, but I wanted to try and hone in my thinking and determine if other experts out there feel it is possible to develop a pipeline of the type, I think it's David Farmer described, from the point of creation of content, whether it's chemistry or math, to the point where the student acquires knowledge from that content. I really don't know if it is within the scope of this solicitation to try and do something like that over 3 years. My initial idea was to provide professors such as Nelson and many others with a pipeline to which would be submitted content that was created using pre-selected standard tools and could, as much as possible, be automatically rendered into formats that lend themselves to being useful by individuals with print disabilities, not only blindness or low vision. A print disability we define as a disability that precludes an individual from acquiring knowledge in a conventional way by reading text. Could be dyslexia, learning disability, low vision, color blindness. There's a large scope of disabilities that fit under this definition. So I open things up for comment, and maybe some input would be really good to help me get my brain around this.
Excellent. You finished now, or do you want a little more?
No,
Finished.
I'm done. Short, sweet.
Excellent.
Can I mention something? I would like to just because so I'm part of the Math Checks group, and we've been reaching out recently particularly to the NSF in order to find out whether they would be happy to sponsor us, or a project would be valuable that would be particular about rendering math graphics coming from LaTeX, say, online as well as accessible. And we had a reply just a couple of days ago from somebody at the NSF. And I would like to share that because I found it very peculiar, their reply, which does not fit at all to what Steve is saying there. And let me just read that out to you. Thank you for reaching out to me. There has been quite a lot of work on this topic previously by others, and you would have to both demonstrate familiarity with these efforts and a convincing case. Otherwise, I don't think that there will be a green light of the review panel. And now the best sentence. Also, I am not sure LaTeX is really a platform of interest to large numbers of people anymore. So overall, I'm afraid I cannot be very encouraging.
Gee.
This is just to put this out there, which seems to be entirely contradictory to what, in many ways, there's other solicitations.
Oh my gosh.
Who wrote that, and what division of NSF are they in?
So the person is called Ephraim Kleinert, and I think it's human-centered computing. It's CC to disability access as well. And so obviously we did a bit of research on this particular person, and he seems to be a professor emeritus from a university not far away from where David actually sits. David sits at Union College. Anyway, so that's just and now back to the proper discussion. Sorry about that.
No, I have a question, Volker. How did the response strike you? Was it surprising to hear that? Or is that something you expected?
Very surprising.
Yeah, my God.
Because I kind of consider myself on top of the literature in that field. Maybe not as much on top of that, say, some of my PhD students should be. But that's why I'm very surprised that there also doesn't seem to be a working pipeline out there that gets you from a say LaTeX style specification of a graphic, like say think about Tixi or something along that line, Tixi package, to something that renders on the web plus is accessible and might contain some semantic information. So that's why I thought either the person doesn't really know what they're talking about, or there's really, or I don't know, I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I'd like to try and bring in another thread, which I think will be of particular interest to Patrick, which is coders. I'll preface this with a few words, which is I'm on the blind math list and the visually impaired programmers list. And I get the sense that the blind math is much more concerned with people in education, and the coders list is much more concerned with people who are in employment or seeking to be in employment. And I think in this group, just because of the accidents of, well, who's turned up, the coders side are not well represented. So I'm going to give Patrick at least double speaking time if he wants it, because he represents an equally important community. And he's also the only one of us who's visually impaired.
I mean, I'm happy to talk to that. And, you know, the grant did definitely speak to me. And there was an opportunity for a very small grant that I was thinking of putting together something for basically, there's a lot of energy right now, I would say, in visually impaired community. We've seen it on Reddit and also on the Program L list, which I'm fairly new to, and a couple of other communities that I'm part of, Apple Viz and stuff like that. And people are really excited about learning Python for obvious reasons, because it's a great job skill, but also because I think that blind people are very motivated to solve it's almost like we're at an early stage of computing or something like that, where there's huge amounts of unsolved problems everywhere from the perspective of a blind person. And also after I learned Python, I was able to make interfaces accessible that I used every day that were, previously inaccessible, basically like hacking type stuff. So there's a lot of energy around it. And people are some people are getting to the point where they are good at Python and everything like that, but there's a lot of ways of getting there. It's not very standardized, and people tend to have to put together a lot of like ad hoc solutions to the same problems over and over again. And also what the standard solution is often changes within short periods of time. Like editors that people use, like F# for visual impairment, become like kind of like old and not used as much anymore, and then people have to find new things. Or like the one I use, Emacs Speak, is like kind of notoriously difficult to kind of get started with, even though it's very powerful once you get there. So, and at the same time, I think there's some opportunity to create something that would be a bit of a royal road for blind and visually impaired program or beginners to get to a point of actually being proficient. So what I would love to see is a little bit of like a serious tutorial put together, or like a standard path to learning, say, for example, Python. I mean, it's what I do, but I think it's also where I see there are a lot of energy and drive. And to put together some materials that would make it considerably easier, I guess, for blind and visually impaired people to get started. That's very early stages of programming. And I feel like I make tutorials and do stuff like that. So if there was an initiative like that, I'd be very interested in being part of it. And I'm also a grant writer, so I'd be very interested in helping to write something.
I'd like to try and integrate things a bit by first of all asking a question of Steve, who knows the government better than I do. Would a standardized accessible solution for Python programming be in scope for the grant?
I have no idea. Those kinds of things are decided by the peer reviewers and actually by the agency. Solicitations like this, and I've been peer reviewers on hundreds of proposals. The first cut is looking at the proposal to see if it meets all the requirements. That's done by the agency. Those proposals that seem to meet all the requirements are then presented to peer review, and it is those individuals that decide whether or not the importance of what is being proposed is ranks high. So I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Oh, okay, that's fine. And I think there's the danger of what Volker said, which is you get a peer reviewer who's got his own mind, or a mind different from yourself, and you just haven't said the right thing. I'm looking at the key proposal. The thing is, it's supposed to maximize the economic and self-sufficiency of people with disabilities. So anything that sort of helps blind people, visually impaired people get a career is in scope, I would think, on that point of view. And the high-tech companies perhaps have got that more sewn up than we think. but I'll go on to my next thing, which is, would it be possible to make blind programmers part of the project, in the sense that if the tools we create are customizable by blind people, then that's a form of empowerment. And I think maybe Patrick can comment on that.
I mean, let me make sure I'm unmuted. Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like that's pretty essential. And I feel like there's getting to be a fairly kind of getting to an inflection point where there are enough blind coders out there. We've always been around, but I think there's enough blind coders. Like I know Josh Mealy at Smyth Kettlewell does really interesting work. There's enough of us around that I think it's worth talking to people to get them into it. I guess also from my perspective, I feel like I could probably put together like a fairly decent grant around this, but my main issue is I'm not in a perspective. I don't think, maybe you can correct me on this, because I'm not I haven't done stuff on the SAM system, and I haven't done stuff as a PI, but basically I'm not really in a institutional position to be a PI on the grant. Because right now my only institutional affiliation is I have a postdoctorate for a year at the Graduate Center here in New York. And even when I was an administrator at Columbia, I just left that role a couple months ago. I wasn't in as an administrator, I wasn't in a position to write to be a PI. So I feel like even if we come up with, even if I see a way forward on something to do, I think that it's going to require something much more consortial, and I think it needs an aegis and like an institutional home. So I think that's something I would like to discuss if people think that this would be something that has legs.
Yeah, one quick comment, the philosophy, I'm sorry, Volker.
Go ahead.
I have a feeling you're going to say the same thing I am, but nothing about me without me is an unwritten philosophy when writing proposals having to do with accommodating people with disabilities. If you do not include the people who you're targeting as part of the project, there is no way you will ever get funding. So Volker?
Yes, well, two comments effectively. I mean, we know, I personally know dozens of blind programmers. So we would just go to Google, there's more than a dozen there. I think it's more of a risk of getting the expert people that already know everything anyway in there. I mean, if you say, Patrick, you're using Emacs Speak now, hooray, you're the second user I now know. The first user is Rahman himself, and nobody else really, I managed to use it, but I only managed to use it because I can see what's going on.
No, it's notoriously difficult to set up.
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah, well, it's great. It can do.
I'm not proposing to teach people that, just to be clear.
Anyway, but what I more think is what you would want to get in there is the blind students that are starting out that have to learn this. So that will be probably more of a difficulty to get those involved than the people actually already know it. And from a as a computer science point of view, if I were to read something about, we want to teach blind kids how to program in Python, then my first reaction would be, where's the transferable skill? What if Python goes out of fashion in a couple of years' time? So what? How are you going to teach them TypeScript? How are you going to teach them C++? How it would have something more transferable in terms of the programming language and possibly the programming paradigm in there. But in general, kind of getting accessible programming into schools, that's something that's certainly very much worthwhile. Because programming used to be a job which would be given to blind people quite a lot in the olden days when everything was on a console. Nowadays, with all the graphical IDEs, it's not that easy anymore.
I have a question for David from your standpoint, from AIM. What is your take on math accessibility? What is, if you can describe it, what is the general attitude toward it?
Well, I mean, those who think about it at all, would say, well, MathJax is, makes the math on a web page accessible, or as accessible as anything else is going to be. So that's right. So, I mean, I'm involved with the Pretext project along with Alexei and Volker and others. And so, I mean, they're doing great stuff with Braille. Braille, okay, I don't mean to demean anything. Braille's way easier than accessibility in a browser because it's large, it's, okay, ironically, it's visual, okay? In Braille, you do want to write vertical line, X vertical line, because you don't need to know how to pronounce it. You just need to read it the same way a sighted person reads it on a page. So, I mean, AIM's got a lot of good press from all the work that Utmost and Pretext has done with Braille. But, it's really all due to MathJax that we have any of that.
Thank you. It strikes me, Volker, that chemistry, very narrow scope, could be a way to go with this. I don't know what your thoughts are, but everybody's talking mathematics, and you hear very few people mentioning chemical structures.
Yes, I understand. Well, it might not be the right group of people, because so I work a lot in chemistry, as you know, Steve, and we've just started a new service online with my company, effectively, where accessible chemistries can be easily generated by anybody, not just via an API, but online, and you can listen to it and explore things and so on. And what's missing there is, and that's an interesting point, Steve, that would probably fit on that grant, is the full pipeline as well. Something where the blind chemist or can actually draw their own molecules, gets the feedback on that, and then actually has the accessible elements out there. So it's interesting. I'm going to have a meeting with what are they called? Is it W.W. Norton? It's one of those publishers. They do a lot of chemistry in early November, because they're also very interested in their new platform, that they don't just produce a bit like, think a bit of like what you have in math. If you are able to write LaTeX, you can get to the accessible output, and then you can listen to it on the web. But kind of being able to actually generate that math correctly first is the difficult bit for many blind kids. And the same thing is, of course, for chemistry, where you have to draw, and drawing is generally difficult if you can't access the user interface easily.
I'd sort of like to ask Steve a question, which is, if the funding was announced tomorrow, when would the proposal be due?
Probably 60 days.
So we can't wait. We have to start now, don't we? If we want to be.
We have to start brainstorming this and thinking through it. It is usually more successful for a university to submit a proposal and have someone be the PI than a small business like ours, although we have received a fair number of grants. So I would probably be looking for universities to partner with that have someone interested in this topic.
Well, if we've got a good project that we can hawk to a university, and they'll say, yeah, well, we'll put it on our headed paper, then haven't we come out ahead?
Yes, I think we would, but we need to limit our thinking. The scope could be so big that you'll never be successful. And to narrow the scope, I think would require input from the entity that we would expect to maybe embrace it. I don't know. I mean, this is a major problem that we're talking about that has many solutions, a little here, a little there. This person did this. There's 25 applications that can help you convert math into accessible formats. To get arms around that, it would be best to get experts at a university to describe what they are doing and maybe focus on something that has a rich bed of research to support it. I mean, that's the way I look at it.
I'm going to do a little bit of boasting here, which is through a chance conversation in the university shop, I discovered that there was a funding opportunity from JISC, which is a sort of university's research conglomerate, for which mathematics might be in scope. And the closing date, I think, was sometime next week. And through a bit of help and a lot of hard work, including over weekends, I got a proposal in and it got the money.
Really?
And it went through the university. There was only one university and it was only £30,000, but I got it through in a few days, in a week. It was there with the, I wrote the proposal over a weekend, and within a week it met the deadline with JISC. So things can be possible. I'm not nearly as young and vigorous as I was then. Can I ask a question, which is, would all of you be interested in trying to form some sort of rough draft of a project in an open source way? In other words, publicly visible?
Sure, with what objective?
We run with it, or somebody else runs with it, or we simply get benefit from having done it. I think the main benefit is, if you get benefit from, we learn from our successes, but we also learn from our failures. So just to have a shot at it.
The it you described, are you referring to an accessibility pipeline?
That would be part of it. I mean, the great thing about doing it open is that other people will say, "Oh, I'd like to contribute an idea." And of course, that's the difficult thing. But I'm just wondering if it's an idea that will sort of float everybody's boat. And Steve sort of seems maybe. I'm going to call out some names: David and Volker. What do you think? Without commitment, what do you feel about having a go for a couple of weeks to see what comes out of it?
Could be an idea. So what I would like to do before I commit here to anything, I would like to have a discussion with David, the other David, not David Farmer, David Savone, because we have something, pretty much already in the pipeline, which is kind of nearly ready for a proposal. As I said, we're trying to shop it around to the NSF, whether we, as kind of the math check side of things, would want to go for something of that nature, just to get some funding into that project. But otherwise, in general, yes, I would certainly be happy to, or kind of be involved. Oh. I have to say that I've just moved countries, so I'm a bit between things, so time might not be very good. David, sorry.
But Volker, I think something like making it easier to get MathJack's accessibility onto your pages, that would actually be in scope for this proposal. Never mind developing MathJacks, just let's use this wonderful tool more widely. Yes. I think that's in scope.
We were thinking about the expansion to the graphics domain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
getting Tixi rendered, for instance, getting
Yeah.
the full Tixi package fully with accessible rendering, that would be fantastic. And 3 years would certainly be not enough.
Yeah, but what's the word? Integrating MathJax into more systems meets the goals of this grant opportunity, I think. So on that basis, you could participate without damaging or sharing your big project.
No. As I said, I mean, we're always happy to be involved.
Right. But you want to talk with David?
Yes. So David Stavone, yeah, obviously, because he's kind of
Yeah.
he started MathJax
Right.
years ago. So
Okay, so that's
go beyond it, and he can't come tonight, I'm afraid, because he's currently driving as we speak from Union College to his place in West Virginia, where he actually lives. So, but I'll meet him again next week, and we'll discuss further.
And David Farmer, perhaps your position is similar, that you need to consult before you can commit?
Oh, no, I don't need to ask anybody anything. Yeah, so I'd be happy to participate in these discussions. I'd be happy to participate in discussions about math formulas, not math graphics. So Volker, I know, is deep into graphics along with Alexei and other people. I think a lot of work needs to be done just in formulas so that they get pronounced correctly when they're read out. So I'd be very happy. I have a couple of thoughts about the grant. So I'm looking at the page, which I think has the information about the call for proposals we're talking about. It doesn't have a lot of detail, and it's not officially open yet. And 200,000 for 3 years is not a lot. Okay, that's
it's actually 600,000 total, 2 for each of 3 years. But maybe that's what you understood.
Okay, I guess it's okay. It's not okay. I thought it was 200,000 total. You're telling me it's 200,000 a year.
Yes. 600,000 total over 3 years.
But then how do I reconcile that with they expect to give 7 awards and the total funding is 1.4 million?
Because many people propose things that are less costly. Some people propose things that are more costly, and the proposal is thrown out. These are just general guidelines. But I talked to one of the managers who will be issuing the solicitation, and she told me the best thing to do is write a budget for 3 years to the tune of 200,000 per year for a total of 600,000 over 3 years.
Okay, so I agree. That's an amount worth actually trying for. So if you're talking about the pipeline to make math formulas accessible, I'm happy to participate in discussing the scope of that. And if you're talking about something else, I'm happy to participate as a facilitator. So I've actually helped a lot of groups put together complicated proposals for complicated projects. And I can do that when I'm not involved. So if you go with chemistry or something like that, I'm actually happy to help as someone who doesn't care what the content is, but I'll be a good person to help you understand, are you telling a good story? Are you making a good case? Do the pieces fall together? So either way, I'm agnostic to whether or not it's about the topic I am personally interested in, but I'm willing to participate either way.
Maybe I could add something in terms of clarification, because I think it's always a bit confusing what MathJax is and what I do. So I do a system which MathJax uses, and that does the voicing of all the math, right? So that's quite independent, actually. So I'm happy to be involved with that without getting, without talking to David first. because that system does not just run in math checks, that runs, for instance, also in Chromevox, obviously, but also in text helps system, which is called Equatio. Not sure whether you're familiar with that. That's particularly geared towards print impaired students. So they're particularly keen on aiming for the dyslexia crowd, etc. And so that, in many ways, all the accessibility is always done in that system, and that's independent of any. So I'm very happy to be involved in that. Unlike David, for instance, who believes in the goodness of authors and that they can be trained to at some point say absolute value of something rather than open vertical bar, closing vertical bar. I don't believe in that, and I believe that a lot of this kind of has to be reproduced in terms of the semantic enrichment, and that's what I find scientifically also interesting, the pattern matching and the context analysis and that stuff. So I'm always keen on getting a bit more of that work done.
Can I ask two things of Patrick? The first is, I haven't found your email address on the web. Could you pop it into the chat? I'd love us to be able to keep in touch. And the second is, how does all this fit in with you? And if it doesn't fit, suggest changes or tell us where the rub is. Do you think you could participate in such a project or such a project proposal?
Let me just make sure I'm unmuted. One of the
You are.
most annoying things of Zoom. Okay, good. So yeah, I mean, I would say, first of all, my background is as a kind of programming plus humanities. So I'm not useful remotely for formulas or for like visualizations, I would say. I would be very happy from a grant writing perspective to jump in and help you draft more on the, just in the scut work side of that. But I would say there's probably space here if there's 7 for one that would be more mathjax oriented and one that would be more Python oriented. Obviously, I'd be putting together a team starting for, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, I'd be very happy to have any of you work on something related to that. But I probably would have to, the main thing from my perspective, unfortunately, I don't have, maybe in a few years, that would be interesting. Maybe in a few years, I'll be able to, be more of a credible PI, on something like this. But for now, I would need to track down someone who'd be a credible principal investigator on that. So from my perspective, I do have a few people in mind that I could approach, but if anyone has people in mind who would be kind of like a real like bullseye for something related to teaching people coding, it doesn't even have to be Python necessarily, but something coding related. I just think, I do Python, and Python is big right now, but there's other programming languages that could also be reasonable choices, I think, there too. But yeah, basically that would be the thing that would be the biggest stumbling block for me to move quickly on this. Because I kind of could see, honestly, I think that something built around Python would probably do well, just because people kind of know that it's big right now. Or the people are kind of vaguely aware. They always have like a nephew who's doing Python or something like that. So it might be the kind of thing that gets the grant, the proposal some attention or something like that. But for me, it's the institutional component, and just being the smallest of small businesses, as I'm sure Steve knows. Maybe I'm sure you have a bigger business than I do, but it's not quite as credible as having a university affiliation, and that's really what I'd need.
I don't think you need to be a PI to be funded by this project. I think we're looking for, well, at the moment in this room, Steve and perhaps Volker are the people most capable of being a PI. But to be a participant and supporter and beneficiary of the project, I don't think I mentioned that. There's, we want involvement from people who are beneficiaries.
But would you have to be at a US university for that?
I think Steve said that the PI and so to speak, the fund holder would have to be US, but they could outsource.
Yes.
David Savone would be obviously my choice as a Z.
Yeah.
I got to talk to him.
Yeah.
First.
Right.
Yeah, please do talk to him. It's my belief that a university-based PI is the way to go. It's the way to structure a proposal, especially if it is with a university that has a successful track record in this discipline or similar discipline.
There's people at Baruch here in the city who I think might actually serve that role, but it would be kind of a secondary connection. They're not people like I'm immediately close to. I know people who know those people pretty well, but
I think our job here is to formulate a ball, if you like, that others can roll. And having done that, for some of us, the best thing might be to step away and get on with the rest of our lives. And I think the one concern is that we should, so to speak, give a lot of hooks for people to get involved in, even though we won't use them. And when I started all this, I said, well, what's the purpose of all this? Oh yeah, this is my notes for where next. So we don't need a steering group. We can all have a hand on the wheel. So I'll send you all an email afterwards on this. And I think the scope of the group is supporting, participating, and benefiting from large-scale projects such as the one we've been talking about. Not necessarily this one, and perhaps even the NSF one that Volker has been so disappointed with. But just at this point, we're, focused on this one because it's here and likely to arise. But I think we want to have a sort of more permanent existence of a clearinghouse for people that want to bid for funding to go ahead with this sort of stuff. And I think that we want to be open to math and physics and chemistry and other subjects as well. Do I get everybody's vote on that?
Sure, that's fine with me.
Oh yeah, we're getting a bit. We're 7:30 now. People that can stay people that want to stay are very welcome to stay. Anybody that wants to add some closing words is very welcome to do that. And I hope that Steve and Volker would at least. And then we'll sort of have a formal closing. The recording will stay on. And those that have got more time to spare can talk some more.
That sounds good, Jonathan. Go ahead, Nelson.
Okay, I just wanted to interject here. I was looking through Google News last night and saw an interesting item that announced that Google Chrome is going to have a plugin to support PDF file editing. So in other words, this will be something similar to the Adobe Acrobat tools, but available on more diverse platforms. I mean, we have on my campus an Acrobat license for a broad suite of Adobe products, but they're strictly Mac OS and Windows, neither of which are of interest in my department. So having a plugin available on one browser that allows PDF editing and document collaboration is, I think, of considerable interest. And I also think it will drive the competing browsers, notably Brave and Edge and Opera, to offer similar capabilities. And that might open PDF up to being a much more shareable document format for development.
I've got a quick question. Does everybody here have or is willing to get an account on GitHub?
We have one.
Yeah. Patrick probably does. Volker does. Okay. We use GitHub as one of the major collaboration platforms. Okay. That allows me to sketch out what I want to do, what I think might be a good thing to do, and share it with you. and that will make collaboration a lot easier. Okay, that's me finished. Volker, Steve, closing words?
No other than, oh, go ahead, Volker.
I think I cut you off again. Sorry about that. Well, yeah, first of all, I think it's a good initiative, and it sounds much more hopeful than what we had earlier this week, as I've quoted. And so you know, I think there's more to STEM than just math, and there's definitely more to STEM than just formulas. It's what, you know, what I want to do in my life in many ways might be far too broad for a project like that. But if we can at least get one or two of kind of small parts of that pipeline going, I think that will certainly be worthwhile. And if anybody wants to talk a bit more about chemistry, I'll be happy to stay on for a bit and we'll discuss more chemistry.
Yeah, I'll stay on a little bit. I'd love to chat more about what you're doing. I actually went to your company's website and saw the service. And I said, man, you never sleep. You just keep moving forward with new and innovative solutions.
Okay, if there's nothing left, then I'll declare the first hour formally closed. And I'm really delighted that we had such a quality group here. And
It's been a pleasure meeting all of you. So thank you for facilitating.
Same here, Patrick.
Well, thank you, Patrick.
I got to turn something in by the end of the day. So I'll hop off. But I'm hoping, you know, whether or not this becomes a, you know, the thing around which something develops, there probably will be more things like this in the future. I think having some group that's ready to kind of move into action and has pieces in place for that would be really advantageous. So hope you all have a great afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and I'll see you at more of these hopefully. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, Nelson. Nice
Bye,
having
Nelson.
you.
Thank you.